As they had in the wake of the Civil War, hard times spawned a new crop of outlaws. This Indiana boy would grow up to be the Jesse James of his day, an outlaw whose daring and whose devil-may-care spirit would earn him fame from coast to coast. His roots were in America's heartland, a peaceful Midwestern town that reflected the values that the nation in the 1920s desperately tried to cling to. His home was comfortable and there was food on the table. But from these seeds sprung one of America's most notorious criminals. His name was John Dillinger. During 1933 and 34, John Dillinger left a trail of bullets and bodies in his wake as he and his gang killed 10 people, robbed at least 4 banks, and broke into 3 jails to free members of his gang. Early in his crime spree, when Dillinger was arrested in Ohio, the press predicted the end of his career. Brought to heel amid great fanfare, Dillinger was hustled off to jail, only to escape within a week. Arrested again in Arizona, he was flown home to Indiana for prosecution there. Under heavy guard, he was hauled to a jail that the Indiana authorities considered to be escape-proof. The photo session at the jail before Dillinger was locked up would prove a source of acute embarrassment to the state officials who posed with the genial outlaw. In his cell, Dillinger went to work carving a gun from scraps of wood which he blackened with shoe polish. That was all it took. The New York Times gave the bold escape front-page coverage. For his getaway, he stole the warden's car. And he did it all with pieces of a wooden washboard. The escapade made him America's public enemy #1, a title he inherited from mobster Al Capone, who was now out of circulation serving a sentence for tax evasion. In Washington, the exploits of John Dillinger attracted the attention of J. Edgar Hoover, a third-generation civil servant who had turned a small government bureau into a national crime-fighting machine. At the Bureau, Hoover established an academy for training a generation of G-men in the science of criminology. And he marshaled an army of clerks to sift through the information his agents gathered in the field. Armed with a code of conduct, which he composed for his troops, Hoover set to work promoting the Bureau as the answer to crime in America.
J. Edgar Hoover was simply a master of press agentry. He simply had created both the outlaw and the G-man as opposing forces in which they were locked like cobra and mongoose in a deadly struggle from which only one could survive. He essentially created an atmosphere which would allow his agents to become murderers.
Melvin Purvis was the agent Hoover assigned to bring down John Dillinger. By now, Dillinger was hunted nationwide, and his face was known everywhere. On a hot night in Chicago in July 1934, The trail ended at the Biograph Theater. From a lady friend of Dillinger's, Purvis had learned that they'd be going to the movies that night. The plan was simple. There would be no warning, no attempt to take Dillinger alive. On a signal for Purvis, every man would open fire. America's public enemy number one was dead without having a chance to draw his gun. The bane of J. Edgar Hoover was now a body on a slab. The public celebrated his death with the same wild abandon that had cheered him on during his battle with the law. Melvin Purvis won overnight fame as a nation eager for heroes lavished praise upon everyone's favorite G-Man. And for the moment, no one asked just how John Dillinger had died.
Well, indeed, there were investigations, and a coroner looked at the body, but there were no official reports, and of course all reports were controlled by the FBI anyway. So it wasn't as if they were going to be made available to the opposition. Certainly not in the atmosphere of the 1930s. That atmosphere was one of near hysteria created by Hoover to battle these gangsters. Now today, of course, the apparatus of law would work very differently indeed. And the excesses that were employed by the FBI in the 1930s would be under very close scrutiny, as we have seen in recent times. But in the 1930s, they got away with murder.